Good morning and welcome to our spring virtual C3 conference. C3 is Carolina Career Community. It's a professional network that aims to serve as a key resource to all UNC Chapel Hill faculty and staff who provide career advising to students and employee relations. We offer virtual conferences, lunchtime check-ins, workshops, professional development webinars, monthly electronic newsletter, listserv, and more, all at no cost or obligation to its members. We are, as of right now, we are at 148 members. Again, thank you for joining us. For a little bit of housekeeping, please keep your cameras off and your mics off when other presenters are speaking, but feel free to turn it on. We'll begin to have a discussion. So the theme of today's conference is, what does the post-pandemic world looks like? And how do we best prepare our students for the post-pandemic work world? There have been many discussions on the trends about what the world of work will look like in the post-COVID era. There have also been many discussions on continuing racial injustice and the critical need of our continuing work advancing diversity and inclusion. We see increased company acceptance of employees working from home, better technology tools provided to keep up with daily workflow, adjusted recruiting logistics, and intentional creation of communities within virtual workplaces. These are just a few trends that are already being discussed. So we're looking forward to today's conversation around these topics. I will take a moment and share my screen let's see here. All right, to talk a little bit about the schedule. So just to make it clear, so we will have presentations. We will have an address by Roderick Lewis, and we'll have some presentations, a quick break. Then we will have two more presentations, and we will break for lunch. After lunch, there will be two options for you to follow two different breakouts. So the first one, discussion and Q&A, will be at 12:45, and you will have a choice of joining a breakout room of your choice. And then we'll have another opportunity at which you can join a breakout room on the same topic or a different topic if you would like, and then we will have a closing. This slide is on our website, so please feel free. It is in the chat. The link to the website is on the chat. So you can pull up this slide and kind of start thinking about where you want to go when time comes for a breakout. All right. With this said, we will go ahead and start with our first presenter. Roderick Lewis is the Senior Associate Director of External Relations at the University Career Services. He's a business coach and a talent consultant with expertise in diversity and inclusion, performance improvement, and career management. Roderick has consulted employers on talent acquisition strategies, employee engagement, and employer branding goals. He worked as a human resource consultant in corporate America, focusing on international recruiting, diversity and inclusion, and employee performance for Latin America, Spain, and the USA. To start us off, Roderick was asked to set up the stage and deliver some remarks on post-pandemic workflow.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction, Nadia. So I'm going to share my screen now. All right, here we go. Okay, so again, thank you everybody for attending today's meeting. Very excited to give you an update, state of affairs, as it were, on what's happening in career services at Chapel Hill and in some respects across the country. And to do that, I want to just give you a high-level overview of how 2020 really shaped what we did here in University Career Services at really 1 year ago around this time. And so just to give you a high-level overview, we had a rapid conversion to virtual operations. And so what did that mean specifically for University Career Services and many department-based career services across campus? What that meant was we had to convert all of our one-to-one student career counseling to virtual. And so that meant, meeting through Zoom or meeting through Teams or any other type of virtual platform that was available. That meant our career education workshops that were scheduled with the in-person design had to be quickly converted to a virtual format, and that was done through Zoom. And then, of course, our career and graduate professional schools fairs, we had to convert those. And at the time, we didn't have any virtual platform that was ready to go to put those into. And so what we did was we created resume book formats out of those fairs. And so we were still able to satisfy our employer and student stakeholders and our graduate school and student stakeholders. And last but not least, we had to convert our on-campus interviews and info sessions to completely virtual. So that just gives you a high-level overview of some of the things that we were having to really put our heads down and really make sure that we could create a seamless operation for our students and making sure that they, were not going to miss a beat in terms of the service we wanted to provide. The next thing I believe that really shaped how 2020 impacted us as a career center campus-wide, not just University Career Services, but in UCS in particular, we did a student needs survey for Black students. We realized that we hadn't really gotten the voice of our Black student population, really understand how we were meeting their needs and what were some things that, what types of perceptions they had of our career center. We also did what I call a cultural sensitivity and language review of our website and resources and materials. And so when I was speaking holistically of the office. And so this was from our student-facing team to employer-facing team, and also with our assessment that Nadia led. And then I want to talk about what we did in terms of reimagining our career fairs and events, and so especially ones that were diversity themed. And so we looked at different ways on making sure that we were able to analyze that data and track that data based on who was attending those fairs so that we could be sure that we were doing the maximum outreach possible. And finally, there was a chancellor's initiative to work with the Covenant Scholars based on a report from McKinsey nationwide looking at how universities support low-income students. And so this is something that UCS has been involved in, and that would be part of our portfolio to work with these specific targeted populations. That just gives you kind of a high-level overview of how 2020 impacted us as a department, as an office. And so next, what I want to do is kind of show you some data to really help you understand what do the numbers look like when we talk about where job postings are. So a lot of times students and professionals and people want to know, okay, where are these job postings coming from? So one of the things that we do is to look at our data through Handshake. So as you all know, Handshake is the platform that we use to connect our students and employers, and also manage student one-on-one counseling and workshops and info sessions and everything that we do to manage our events. But when you look at the data, so what I did was I wanted to show you what did the world look like pre-pandemic, right? And so when we start thinking about what were the trends, where was it going? Who are these industries that were really producing a lot of the job postings that we would be managing at University of Career Services and the campus at large for all the departments we support with Handshake. You see the industries were largely the government, types of related industries, internet, software, healthcare, HR, advertising, K through 12, and on down the list, right? But what I'm listing here are top 15. Now, what I want to show you as we move to the 2020 and 2021, you'll see there's some slight change, but it isn't as large as you would think. So one of the changes that you would see on here, the industry representation largely is the same. There's a new entrant here. So biotech and life sciences, they made the top 15. Now they weren't in this top 15, and there is as you see here at the bottom as well, scientific and technical consulting was on this list in 2019 through 2020, but it's not here when we go to March 20 through 2021. So there's just some slight changes in terms of which industries were producing the most jobs when we talk about during the pandemic versus pre-pandemic. Other than that, there's some shift in who's at the top. So you see government has moved down, K through 12 has moved up in terms of number of job postings that are coming from this industry. Healthcare, as you might imagine, is still consistently at the top. But even here, it's number 4 when we look at March 2019 through 2020, because UNC Chapel Hill is known for producing a lot of health care related majors and graduates. So they were always going to be a major industry, whether we're talking about pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, but especially during the pandemic, you can imagine that this industry is going to move up in terms of producing a large number of jobs. The same is true. You see research on here. You can imagine why biotech and life sciences is here, because of the heightened awareness and attention and resources needed to tackle the pandemic. So this is industry, right? So now, this gives you another graphical, a visual way to look at the changes from year to year. And so don't let I should say, these delta changes throw you off. This is just merely showing, okay, what was the change between 2019 and 2020, 2021 from this March timeframe, because this is when the pandemic started and this is where we are today, 1 year later. And so these industries are still producing a lot of the job postings that we see on our Handshake platform. So they're still in the top 15. All this is showing you here is basically, what does it change year over year? And in some cases, the change is slight, right? In terms of when you look at some of the drop off, in some cases, there's a very small drop off. But in some cases, you see here, the incremental increase is in the thousands, right? So you think of K through 12 education, and that the industry having to go completely virtual, you can understand why you have this huge increase in job postings from this industry, because there was a
Broderick, I think you might have muted yourself.
All right, are we good now? Sorry about that.
It was just the last sentence or so.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Maybe I'm messing around here with the mouse. So one of the things that I want to just kind of highlight here is why these industries, of course, are increasing the number of job postings, and it goes back to what I said earlier. It makes sense given the heightened awareness around the resources needed throughout the pandemic. Now, you have here sports and leisure, and on the surface you can say, wow, but why is that increasing? But as you can imagine, people have been cooped up and haven't been able to access a lot of public spaces. That doesn't mean that there haven't been innovations in how people do sports and leisure, right? So if you think of the Pelotons and other virtual types of platforms that have apps and all these other resources and tools and technologies that have sprouted up to still take advantage of how people want to do some type of sports or do some type of leisure, then it makes sense where you can see there could be an increase in job postings from these particular industries that really represent a broad range of organizations. So now let's look at our job functions. So we just looked at industries, right? And so when I'm looking at data, I like to see industries that produce jobs, because that gives me an idea of, okay, here are the industries that are really growing, or here are industries that are plateauing, and I can kind of make some inferences from there. I also like to look at job functions, because that helps me to get a little more granular and say, hey, what are the hot jobs? What are job functions that employers are really needing some support in, needing help in? Then we're able to look broadly in terms of the resources that we offer as a university career center, and also our department-based career centers, to say, hey, here's what we're seeing in terms of the job functions, in which under a job function, there could be a vast number of job roles. These functional areas help you to see where the money is going, so to speak. And so where are employers really looking for the most help? What you see in pre-pandemic times, and we'll just ignore this other, because that can just include anything that an employer felt that didn't fit under our normal categories. But if you look at, again, education was always, still high up there, education, teaching, and training types of job functions. But also your web, software engineering type jobs, data analytics, IT, sales, and so on and so forth. Business development is here, and I have it highlighted because it's here in the pre-pandemic times. But when we move to the time frame during the pandemic, between March 2020 and March 2021, then business development disappears in the top 15, and what is in its place now is consulting, right? And so I thought that was pretty interesting change in terms of consultants not on there as a top 15 job function between March 2019 and March 2020, but it's on here between March 2020 and March 2021. Now, keep in mind that I'm using only this time frame. If I were probably going back from August to December, it would look totally different because the industries and that are recruiting at that time and the types of job functions that are posted at that time will look a lot different than they look in the spring. But I thought it was important to kind of look at this from a 12-month thought between, the 2019 and 2020 year and 2020 and 2021 year, just to give you an idea of what changes have occurred since we've been dealing with this pandemic. And so as you look at these job functions, and you see that these are job functions that typically are the ones that line up with some of our department, majors, right? So you think of like your CS, computer science and School of Information Library Science and business school majors and School of Public Health. A lot of these will line up with these type of, career oriented type of majors, so to speak, right? Or career line type of majors. And then there are a lot of jobs that are in between that don't line up with a specific major. Any number of majors have transferable skills to do. And so it's important for us to see these types of job functions. I forgot school education, these types of job functions, because it helps us as a career center be able to help students that may not have a major that has prepared them directly for these types of job functions, but their major has prepared them for a lot of these job functions that are in between, like the administration, business development, sales, and a lot of community and social services, a lot of jobs where they have even some of the technical skills, but our job is to help them articulate that and redefine themselves outside of their field. And so again, when we look at what these top 15 job functions look like in this chart here, you're able to see a different visual in terms of the delta change, right? And so as I spoke earlier, you see that consulting, within the time frame that we're evaluating here, there's a huge increase in this time frame versus the prior time frame. And the other, we'll just ignore that, but we look at healthcare services, engineering, civil, mechanical, other. Then you see some drop-offs with everything else. Okay, now that can be expected, but these are still the top 15. It's just that if you're comparing them to a year prior, they're lower, but it's lower relative just to a year ago. They're still the top 15 job functions that we have posted. And so make no mistake about it, there are fewer job postings in this time frame. So you see the grand total, 121,000, close to 122,000 March 20 to March 2021, versus the year prior, pre-pandemic, we had almost 14,000 jobs posted. So make no mistake about it, job postings have dropped, since the pre-pandemic times, but that drop-off hasn't been so large to where we feel it's impacting student choice. Students, really still have a lot of choice out there in terms of job opportunities, because companies have adapted. Companies have looked at opportunities that they can make remote or convert to some type of hybrid role. And so those innovations there, especially within these job functions, show how students still have an opportunity to get internship or full-time job opportunities. And our role is to help them see what's out there. Now, there may be some industries or job functions that are at the bottom of the ranking, so to speak, in terms of ones that are being posted on Handshake or ones that are being posted by industry. And those are where we have to have realistic conversations with students who may be choosing careers in industries that haven't been able to adapt as quickly to a pandemic life, right? And so those would be ones, for example, that are in the hospitality and tourism industry or the airlines, things where they really got hit hard because their business model really was based on an in-person experience. So everything just can't be converted to virtual. And so there are some drop-offs there, but we do see that back. And so it does help to have this data so that not only the campus at large and all of the professionals and student-facing personnel are aware of these industries, but also being able to have those conversations with students to help them be more realistic about career opportunities and career choices, and so they can make better decisions. So next, I want to show you a chart that this is data I pulled from LinkedIn. Now, it wasn't in this format when I pulled it, but however, with LinkedIn, I found some information where they listed their top 10 in-demand job functions based on the jobs that are posted on the LinkedIn jobs platform. So if all of you pretty much are aware that LinkedIn is one of the most robust job postings platforms out there, even though it wasn't really started out that way, but it's become a source where a lot of employers post jobs because that's where all the professionals are. So for them, it makes sense. But this data, in addition to Handshake or data that you can find on Indeed, some of your larger general job boards, really helps in terms of planning and how we look at what we're communicating to our campus community partners and our employer-facing staff on campus and our student-facing staff on campus, as well as faculty and administrators. Being able to look at these top 10 in-demand job functions and what they mean for the types of job opportunities that we are promoting on campus, the types of events that we promote on campus, the conversations we have with students. It doesn't mean that we push students into these careers. It just means that we're aware of one of those top 10 in-demand job functions. And if you can go down the top 20, sure to be inclusive of other job functions that other students may be interested in. But it does help show what this shows you, what you have to be aware of is that digital and all things technical are going to be a part of every job function, some aspect. And so one thing that we have to be conscious of when we are communicating with all of our stakeholders on campus, and this is from administrators, faculty, on down to our students and alumni and everybody in between, is we have to be very careful and conscious about making sure that digital and technology skills are embedded throughout the student experience in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And outside of the classroom, this is where experiential learning opportunities come into play. This is why internships are important. And of course, all of this, how this leads to full-time job opportunities. It's also important for students that want to start their own company. So students that are interested in entrepreneurship, regardless of their major, they're going to need to have a strong understanding of how technology is going to play a role in whatever type of business that they want to pursue. For students that want to go to grad school, they still will eventually go into a career, whether that career is in higher education or that career is in industry, or they too start their own companies. But the role of technology, the role of analytical skills, the role of communications, there are a lot of just skills that are going to be par for the course, regardless of the particular career objective of a student. And so we need to be aware that when we look at these top 10, it just shows you that the technology and technology-based industries or industries that use a lot of technology, those types of job functions, they're going to dictate the types of job functions that are posted and that are available in the market. So this graphic about LinkedIn, it really just gives you, a good idea when you look at the largest one on here, which is software developer, and then right behind it, sales representative, right? And so typically these sales representative roles, these can be technical salespeople, but these are not always people that are, you don't need to have a technology background, but you need to be comfortable with technology. You need to be comfortable discussing technology. And I believe a lot of our graduates, regardless of their majors, we prepare them for that. And the message to them that we had to have collectively in this environment is, being able to reach those majors that traditionally think that, oh, this space is not for me, right? And so these could be your history majors or your philosophy majors or your English majors, and do a lot with analytical skills and communication skills and being able to process a large amounts of information, or being able to have thoughtful communications with people. These are going to be the types of jobs that they may not have thought about, but that are available for them. And this is how we can help them. Project management, customer service specialists. None of these are something that you're going to have to be a computer scientist for, but you're going to be dealing with technology and managing people. So this was an interesting graphic that I wanted to make sure everybody saw today. So let's talk about, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so I keep up with them because what I always want to do is make sure that any of the events that we do, the fairs that we may design, anything that we are coordinating across campus, we want to make sure that, we're using a lot of different data points and we're triangulating to make sure that, we're in the right path, that we're not, going off in one direction, but the world is saying, hey, here are the fastest growing industries, or here are the fastest growing, job functions. And so we want to make sure that that alignment is there, but also making sure that we are in line with what UNC Chapel Hill students typically are interested in. Also, what our community partners, in terms of our employers, what they're seeking in terms of talent, right? So it's a push-pull type of relationship, but we want to make sure that we are trying to satisfy stakeholders to the best of our abilities. Ultimately, employers would dictate what that looks like, right? Because it is the market that creates a job, right? In terms of within the industries, what their demands are, what their needs, and it's based on consumers, based on politics, based on geopolitical. I mean, it's based on a whole bunch of things, changes in technology and all of that. But ultimately, companies would say, "Hey, here's what we need," right? And students would shape that as they get into the organizations based on their unique skill sets. And then, of course, students that want to, grow and create their own companies, they would shape that as well. But when you look at what I want to show you about this information, when you look at, the top, growing, industries or fastest growing industries, they line up with what I showed you before in terms of the industries that we are seeing that are generating the most job postings on Handshake, right? So you look at, these professional services, this can be like your financial services, consulting, computer systems, so anything with IT and internet technologies. All of that is captured in these fast growing industries, right? And so, as long as we are making sure that we are in line with that and we are able to attract those type of organizations to recruit at Chapel Hill, and conversely able to prepare our students to, pursue opportunities within those industries, then we should be good, right? And so that's very important for us to do. Also looking at job functions. And so when I look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, trends in job functions, what does that look like? And so here I've highlighted some of the ones that they listed here with healthcare, support, social services, computer and mathematical occupations. And computer and mathematical occupations, that can include a lot of things. That can include statistics, it can include data analytics, it can include, any number of computer related types of job roles, okay? So these are very broad, and they're broad intentionally so because they include a lot of job roles under them. And then here at the bottom, I've highlighted, that fast growing demand that you see for IT, security, and software development type of roles. Because as I said before, technology is driving a lot of these things, but of course, changes in consumer taste. Like I say, there are things just globally, and in terms of the way the supply chains operate, politics, and how governments are supporting different companies. All these start to change. 5G with we talk about your cell phone. That's like the new big thing now. It's like all these technologies that 5G would be able to allow. In terms of connectivity, in terms of improved access to data and customer information, and being able to do more things in real time. So all of these things that you're able to do if you use Alexa or any of these voice operated controls, a lot of those are due to 5G technologies and all of this embedding of technology and Wi-Fi within a lot of different, what we call dumb objects, right? So you're making these dumb objects smart, and it allows you for greater connectivity, and allows you to collect even more data so that you can improve whatever type of product or service that your organization may be having. So there's a huge demand for people that can help make sense of this, and students in these particular job functions and roles. So given all of the information I just gave you based on, industry trends that we've seen, job function trends that we've seen, just the basic, changes that we've had to make as a collective career center and career centers on campus, converting to virtual, in addition to everybody else that had to convert to virtual on campus. What do we do different this year for our career fairs? So I'm speaking specifically about our career fairs because that is the nexus or one of the largest nexus points that we have that connect students with employers as they go into the workplace. And you'll hear more about the what's going on in the workplace from our other guest speakers today. So our traditional fairs, this gives you a snapshot. I want you to look at, academic year 2018, 2019, and also academic year 2019, 2020. And so our traditional fairs, here's what they look like. We We had some major specific fairs with our nursing job fair, and in some respects, our tech fair was a major specific fair. It's a joint collaboration between computer science department and the School of Information Library Science. And then we had these all major fairs. And then we had a niche fair, which was two niche fairs, which was our diversity fair and our NC Masters Doctoral Fair. So the Doctoral Fair, of course, is only Masters Doctoral Fair is only for masters and above students, or masters and doctoral students. And so these were kind of ways that we say, hey, here's how we're offering fairs based on these types of niche student populations within the broader campus, right? And so they were, effective, in the in-person space. But what we decided, and the data I have here, I have it broken down. So one of the things I've been looking at is ratios, right? And so looking at what did the in-person, student to employer ratio look like in the in-person fairs? Because I wanted to see, like, okay, is there a sweet spot, a number that we should say, hey, if we have a, 7-to-1, student to employer ratio in terms of attendance, hey, that's pretty good. Why I say good? Because based on our surveys and based on our, data that we get, students tend to be more satisfied because they feel, hey, there were enough employers at the event. I had enough opportunities to meet with a variety of employers, and employers tend to be happy because they feel that there are enough students, in terms of that ratio of student to employer, so that even the smaller employer that may not be as well known feels they have an opportunity to meet, at least 20 to 25 students throughout a 3 to 4 hour event. And so these ratios are important. So when we start looking at, trends in our ratios and changes across time, especially in the in-person space, it gives us an indication of, hey, what direction are we going? Are we going in the right direction? And how is this impacting our stakeholder satisfaction? So as you can see, some of these ratios for our, large events like our, fall, expo, it's hovering around, 7. And then we get to the spring, naturally the numbers drop because less students are seeking jobs in the spring. So it's going to be a natural drop off, and that's fine. But we just want to make sure that as we compare year over year, event to event, we want to see what that, what those ratios look like, and what does that tell us as we start matching it up with, surveys and anecdotal evidence of how students and employers feel the event satisfied their needs. So here are our traditional fairs, but in an all virtual environment, we couldn't do traditional, right? And not in the sense that we did with in-person events. Because in the last years, you see for fall 2019, we had like a record banner year in terms of attendance. Like everything was up. Like we really just blew it out the park in terms of the number of students that attended our major career fairs, right? The number of employers that attended our fairs. And so you can look at the numbers here, and you look at the School of Nursing, they're constrained because they only have space for a set number of students and a set number of employers, so they can't grow. But our other events, we had capacity to grow, I would say, by at least 20 to 25% in most cases. And so what that showed me is that things in terms of the in-person events, they were actually going well. And so what you would hear, and people in the career services space, this refrain also well. People have been saying that, talking about the death of the resume for at least 15, 20 years. Oh, the resume is just going away. But the resume is alive and well, and it's very strong. So no matter how many people try to put a nail in its coffin, the resume is still by far, the way that a lot of organizations evaluate talent, right? And so it's not about trying to get rid of the resume. It's about how do you, reimagine it or build upon it and put it in different formats that may make sense in a digital space. And so the same thing with our in-person fairs. People have been saying, oh, the career fairs are dead. Everybody's just, they don't need a career fair. They can just go online and find a job. Yet it's still, because of the nature of the in-person job fairs, right, where you have an opportunity as a student to build a personal relationship with an employer, or to, use your persuasion skills, or use your selling skills, or show, someone in person why you could be a fit, or how you could be a value add for their organization. Then those are things that are not easily replicated in the virtual space, right? Or in a space where there's not an in-person component. Same is true for employers. You say, well, why do employers invest in career fairs? Couldn't they just, get all the talent they need just online and just through their job boards? Well, it sounds good, but as you'll see when I talk about later, virtual has its pluses and minuses, right? But in the in-person space, that allowed for companies to also sell themselves, and position themselves to potential candidates. That allowed them the opportunity to have personal conversations. That allowed your lesser known companies an opportunity to reach students that they may not have reached otherwise, right? And vice versa. It allows students to consider companies that they may not have considered otherwise just because you're in the space and they're able to physically walk around and interact. So this was the world that we were in, and that world was actually increasing. We were actually doing very well in that world in terms of our in-person career fairs. And then, of course, when you look at spring 2020, right up until we were able to get through our diversity job fair and our spring job fair before we had to convert the other fairs, which were our graduate school fairs and our education fair, which took place in March. This was already after the pandemic, right? After the pandemic had begun, after we had to shut things down. So those numbers are skewed. And so those, you really can't match up against prior years. But outside of those, business was booming. Now, let's look at the reimagined fairs. Let's look at what does it look like now? How did our workflow change, right? And so you're going to hear later on in this presentation for other speakers about workflow. Well, our workflow changed significantly, right? I mean, when we think about all the steps we had to take to create in-person fairs, all the lead time it took us because we had to reserve, spaces. We had to, talk with vendors about shipping and handling. There were, documents had to go back and forth here and there. There was signage that had to be created. So there's all these little steps that in the virtual space, no, nothing, none of that. It is merely the platform. Everything takes place in the platform. So the key is getting the right platform because that's where the magic happens. You no longer, as the Career Center professional or staff member, faculty, or what have you, you have a little less control now to shape the events within the platform, right? And so it's key to select the right platform because that's where everything's going to happen. So now there is no shipping, there is no handling, there's no paper trail, there's no signage for this or that. There's no event space. And so from a workflow standpoint, everything was digitized and actually gave us time back as staff to dedicate in other areas to try to make these fairs a success. So we had to dedicate more hours to training and support and helping out employers. Those platforms also offer technical support and training for both students and employers. And so that eased the burden on us as Career Center professionals to feel like, oh, we have to be experts in this platform. No, because we can't solve a technical problem with those platforms because we didn't design those platforms. They're not UCS design platforms. They are a vendor design platform. So that sets the stage for, well, what could we do now in this reimagined space? Because now we're not constrained, by physical boundaries, right? We're no longer even constrained in some respects by time. So this time and space, that usually constrains you in person, we no longer had that constraint. Another thing, since we had been, over the summer saying, hey, let's take this time to really, which we always do over the summer, is reassess and look at all of our fairs. And then we look at all of the data that we can pull from those fairs to understand, any types of trends or gaps or areas where we need to address. We had a student needs assessment that was done that Nadia led for undergrad students. And there was a lot of data we collected on that based on what were students wanting to, out of, their career in terms of industries and majors and what types of job functions were they interested in. So a lot of data, that we were able to pull together, and we were able to be a little more creative with how we did our job fairs this fall, because we were able to do that because we didn't have those other constraints and costs. And so what you see here, we were able to build what's called our, STEM, healthcare, business, career fair. So this was meant to be a more all-inclusive fair that included our technology majors, but also science majors, math majors, and healthcare and business majors. They tended to cluster because a lot of the companies that would recruit tended to recruit all those students anyway, right? And so we had to split across 2 or 3 different fairs in the past, but they're like, well, but we recruit all those students anyway. So let's look at a way to cluster those students and then create a fair that's specifically for our humanities and social sciences majors, because a lot of times they were getting lost in the shuffle and they were feeling like, well, career services really isn't for me. They were feeling like it was all for, the business school, all for the tech majors. So we wanted to create an event that was really targeting our humanities and social sciences majors. And so then we began to look at, hey, let's look at industries, let's look at majors. And then this spring we moved to job functions. So we said, hey, let's create a fair model based on the hot job functions, based on the in-demand job functions that we see in our Handshake platform, and also through a number of other resources that I alluded to earlier. And so we recently completed e-commerce and cyber security job functions fair, data analytics and statistics job function fair, supply chain, all these different job functions based on what we saw were the demand jobs. We also have moved to more of a collaborative approach. And so we no longer do all these standalone fairs that we were constrained to do in person. The only really collaborative fair that we did in the past was the NC Masters and Doctoral Fair. And that was, it's always a hit, right? It is always, goes off well. Well, we decided, hey, let's do that for other fairs. And so we invite partner schools from the ACC, ACC conference to participate in our fairs if they're Handshake schools, and then vice versa. They let us participate in their fairs. And also we did an innovative diversity fair with UNC Greensboro, North Carolina Central University, and Appalachian State to do a joint diversity fair that really wasn't just a career fair. It was really more of a networking fair. It was a panel discussion that allowed students to have authentic conversations with these recruiters and representatives of top companies. And then we ended it off with the career networking piece where they could talk about job opportunities. And so that's a model we want to pursue going forward, because what we found is when we try to do standalone events, we limit ourselves in terms of the number of students that can attend because we're only relying on students at our campus. Well, diversity is such a broad term, and we, all the schools were struggling with low attendance this year because of the increase of virtual platforms and virtual events, that really students became fatigued and burned out. And so regardless of all these glorious events and all these wonderful companies, a lot of students, whether they already had jobs through other, means, because career fairs are not the only way students get jobs, and they certainly don't only just get jobs through Handshake. So, we're still looking at, hey, how are students finding their jobs, and what explains, low turnout at these events versus last year, other than, fatigue and virtual fatigue with Zoom and students probably having other job opportunities. So there were the innovations that we had going to this collaborative approach, and really looking at ways to partner with other schools or to create events that are more targeted and niche and customized based on majors, based on industries, based on class years and what have you. And with that, I would like to end the presentation, and I don't know if there's any time for any questions if anybody has, but if there aren't any questions, I will just turn it back over to Nadia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Radek. We do have about 14 minutes or so. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Thank you so much. I mean, you've summarized in such a short presentation, right, so many different trends. And to me, particularly impressive was how UCS reacted and pivoted, right? And I know every time we use that word anymore, we're kind of tired of it, but truly, how flexible and how, you were and how it yielded the results. I'm just trying to see the chat if there's any questions. I also have asked, I will ask you after the presentation to share slides if possible, so folks can see some of those, really impressive charts that you put together. And personally still appreciate your Friday updates because they provide a lot of information. Maybe considering this audience, what is C3 members, what can they do to, kind of, when you talk about the events, when we piggyback, right, we partner with each other. Is there any message you have to C3 participants? Here we have 32 people, coaches both in ER or cross campus. How can we best, kind of cross promote or, share some of these opportunities or piggyback on each other's successes or capitalize? Do you have any ideas, especially, knowing that we will still be probably in this virtual or at least hybrid format, coming fall. Any thoughts you might offer on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Nadia. So thank you so much for bringing it. I mean, that's an excellent question. It's one thing that we talk about all the time on the ER team, and one of the things that we created a couple of years ago was called the Campus Employee Relations Partners Committee, and that whole purpose of that was just what you stated. It was to try to coordinate and collaborate wherever possible with our campus community partners who also, run events or do any type of employee-based events, especially with large fairs. Because what we wanted to do was we realized that as University Career Services, we didn't even know all of the fairs that were taking place on campus because there wasn't that formal communications with other department-based career centers and other offices on campus that also run fairs. So it's going to be important for us to have those communications because now it's not a matter of quantity of fairs, it's really quality and effectiveness of fairs. So it does none of us any good to say, hey, let's just produce a lot of fairs because that's going to burn out students and it's going to burn out employers. So what we had to do is get smarter about, where do we partner on certain fairs or where does it make sense? There's sometimes where department-based fair, it may make sense for, depending on the department, it may make sense for them to create a fair that is for their students, right? Depending on that department. Other times it may make sense for multiple departments to partner, right? If there's some synergies there. Other times it may make sense for them to partner with UCS, right? Other times it may make sense for UCS to do a fair that's available for all students on campus. So there are a lot of ways to look at, depending on the goal we're trying to achieve, depending on the demand of the students or the demand from our employer partners. So partner is one. The other way is I talk about is promoting. So when we are aware, and this is for all of us, when we are aware of the various events and fairs that are either in the planning phase or about to take place, then we're able to more effectively promote them to our student populations in a more targeted way. And then we can reduce the overlap or not so much overlap, I should say, but to reduce the redundancy in communications to a lot of times the same stakeholders. So for example, if I know that, hey, you already are contacting or communicating a specific event to XYZ stakeholders, then if I'm sending the same thing, what we're doing now is just burning out our stakeholders, and then they may be less likely to share. They probably share, but they're just going to think like, hey guys, don't you know I just received this from XYZ person? So it looks like we're not even coordinated on our end. And so, really that promotion piece, that partner piece, and then that final piece is what I call programming. And programming is what I mean by that is that's when, and I alluded to earlier, that's when you as a department, when you say, hey, there's a niche that I've identified and it's not being met on campus. And we need to fill that niche. So we need to create something. So for example, I'm working with the Department of Statistics and Operational Research now because they're interested in creating a fair for their own students, kind of on the model how we did with computer science and the School of Information Library Science, where they had a joint collaboration, say, hey, we're going to do this tech fair, which was really primarily for students that were majoring in those departments. Well, other departments, I talked to other departments about that model because I said, hey, that model works if you as a department are going to be committed from the top down, from your dean to department chairs and administrative staff and faculty, professors. Everybody has to be committed to making sure students show up and participate in that event because you got to take ownership of that piece. And then you also got to make sure that employers know, okay, what can we expect if we're going to be coming to this department-based fair? Because it would be a shame if, let's say, you sign up 25, 30 employers and only 15 students show up. And so departments have a lot more control of who shows up because they can create the space in terms of time for their students to attend. They can incentivize their students. Faculty can provide credit. They can, give us, it's so many ways that a department can facilitate a high number of students to attend an employer-involved event as significant and time-consuming as a career fair. So I'm a fan of department-based fairs when they make sense, right? Now, would it make sense for every department to do that? Probably not, because then employers would say, hey, we can't be in 20 different places. And so there's a natural consolidation that would have to take place at some point. But when it's like a few departments that really are based on, if you look at the data I presented, a department like statistics, operational research, they can be justified because the data is showing that, hey, industries, most of the job postings are kind of in that space, right? Like the computer science and business majors. There are a lot of industries that those job postings are relevant for those specific, types of majors and departments because they're very career aligned, right? Anything public, health related or, anything nursing, medical related in some respects, every department won't be able to do that. And so that's where we come in as UCS and may say, hey, what are the gaps that we need to fill? Instead of trying to just create fairs as we've traditionally done, we've got to move more to this more shared model, collaborative model, and really figuring out, hey, what makes sense for students and who should be the owner of those particular fairs.
Absolutely, thank you. And the data that you shared is critical when faculty champions, trying to bring it to their department heads, right, or dean's attention, that would be a great illustration for promoting, keeping a Friday afternoon off for a fair and have no classes, no tests, no assignments. And as you mentioned, fair, we don't just show up, there is a lot of prep involved. And so our coaches have time to prepare our students and so forth. Excellent, thank you. There's two questions, let's see here. One question is from Lori. Thank you, Lori. Who is, with a probable decision to be more in person for 21-22, how does this impact this career fair strategy, staying mostly virtual?
I love that question, Laura. Thank you. Hey, Laura, we might not even have to have a campus employee relations partners meetings if I answer all the questions here. No, but that's an excellent question and one that we've been talking about, and I'm talking to my counterparts, not only at schools in the state of North Carolina, but also across the country. And when you work at a main campus career center, your calculus is a little different. So you can't make quick decisions because you belong to student affairs and there's a larger chain of command. So departments are able to try to make decisions because if the dean or faculty chair say, hey, just do this and it's done. Where we don't have that type of leeway. So we still had to gather a little more evidence about we take direction from the chancellor and our student affairs leadership, Amy Johnson, in terms of what will, be any guidelines on in-person events in the fall in terms of number of people that could be gathered in any particular, event. First and foremost, we had to take the pandemic into consideration, but we will, be on top of that. And typically, we've been able to make decisions by June that would impact, the fall of 2021. And then we've said, hey, we've built in some contingency there to if we want to shift strategies for spring 2022, we have time to alert our employee partners and also do what we need to do on our end. But we will do a hybrid model, Lori, to answer your question. It will be a hybrid model. I just don't know what that looks like yet. I have talked to a number of employers and, they want to do something in person. And I can imagine their students, but we know we had to be guided by the health and safety, and we will see what the vaccination kind of uptake and rollout looks like at that time and comfort levels. If we do something maybe in person, maybe it's small scale, so definitely it won't be like one of our large career fairs. But I can almost imagine that it would be explosive. I mean, it would be energetic. Like people would want to be there because people have missed that interaction. So it would just be like just a break from the norm. Like, wow, we actually get to go in person. However, we've got to balance that. And so maybe we look at just building up, maybe in the fall. These are things I have a deeper discussion about with our campus employee relations partners, committee as well. And this information I've gathered from my employee partners and other counterparts. And we could talk about what types of in-person events could make sense, because it also gets into what does it look like for companies that want to do on-campus interviews, and what does it look like for companies that want to do, in-person, workshops, like info sessions like they used to do, which would also extend to, the career education workshops and student-facing team, the work that they do in person as well.
Thank you very much. And Lori, thanks to you. And there's two comments. One is from Suzanne Killian. You can consider a hybrid, especially for niche careers, like you mentioned, and you can have virtual corners at the live career fair. So I thought that was very interesting, like an actual virtual corner breakout room. And also Tracy Wallingford loves your data-driven approach. So thank you very much for that.
Hey, Tracy, shout out to Tracy. We go back.
And, and data, I'm also a data person. So I really just appreciate it because it just makes things so much more evident and right, like how we draw these conclusions and how you make all the decisions for UCS. So Once again, thank you so much for setting up the stage. You set the bar pretty high for the day and truly provided us this overview, kind of where things stand. And again, just very, very much appreciated. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Stick around for as much as you can. And if you don't mind making me a host again, that would be great. So we can take over from here. So thanks again, Roderick. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you, rest of the C3 committee.
Thank you. You're getting some applause here, so virtual applause. With that, thank you very much again, Roderick, for your time and for this presentation. At this time, I would like to introduce Mary Lisa Pegg. Mary Lisa is a business recruitment manager with Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Prior to this, she served of the Office of Alumni Engagement with UNC at Greensboro, and you may view her full bio at LinkedIn profile. It's connected to our conference website. Mary Lisa was asked to speak to workforce changes in North Carolina in 2021. Thank you, Mary Lisa.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me. Nadia, this is such an exciting day, and I'll tell a little bit about that more in a minute, but let me share my screen here just to confirm. Can everyone see my screen okay? Perfect. All right, awesome. Well, thank you again for having me. My name is Mary Lisa, and today I'm presenting on the Pandemic and Talent Workforce Changes in 2021. And just a little info on me. So I am Mary Lisa. I'm a business recruitment manager at EDPNC. And our office is primarily responsible for working with major projects that are coming through North Carolina. So that can look like a lot of different things. Usually we'll start with someone in a consultant or a company who's looking to grow or expand to North Carolina. And then we work with them through the entire process, all the way up through working with commerce and granting any kind of incentives that might be available to them. So my role focuses primarily on the food processing industry. And I am the only one on our team that has a focus. And so it's been really exciting to kind of learn more about the food and ag of North Carolina. A little bit of my background. So my master's degree is in higher education from UNC Greensboro, go Spartans. I am a current MBA student and I'm dangerously close to finishing. So very excited about that. And then I have spent the last 8 years in higher ed. So I've worked in career development, business graduate recruitment, first year programming, alumni engagement, and then a host of other partners across campus. While I have loved economic development, it is really exciting today to be amongst higher ed colleagues. So it's good. It was great listening to Roderick's presentation. I felt home again. Okay, so a couple of things that I want to touch on, some changes happening in the workplace. And I just want to preface this by saying a lot of this is things that me or my colleagues have kind of seen. I did listen to a recent presentation on a very similar topic where they had talked about a lot of these things. So some of these are data driven, and I can give you some of those sources if you're interested. But most of this is based on my experience, my conversations, and things along those lines. So some changes that are happening: hiring is back and economic development is strong. I would say last year we saw, maybe as March and April hit, economic development slowed down. We saw less projects coming through, less conversations on expansions and things along those lines. However, very, very quickly, things ramped back up. And so economic development is thriving and we're seeing more jobs coming to North Carolina. Our team is very busy and the consultants that we are working with are very busy. And that's a good sign. It means North Carolina is a good place to work and a good place to do business. Remote work is here to stay, but it is not widespread. And so a hybrid environment we think is going to be key here. And I'll talk a little bit as I move through the presentation on how to prepare students a little bit and what we're seeing from some of our HR conversations about what students need to know to be prepared. But hybrid environments are really important. And so making sure that students are prepared for what a hybrid environment may look like. We do think that 15 to 35% of the workforce will almost be entirely remote in the coming years. And so there are always going to be those opportunities for remote work. And again, we'll touch on that in a little bit. The office is still important, but it will need modifications. And so what we're seeing is that the office may turn into more of a different approach. It could be more for group meetings or collaboration, large meetings, things along those lines. And so we're thinking that the flexibility in the design and function of the office is going to be very different as we move forward. Of course, things like ventilation, layout of offices, hours, visitors, things along those lines are all going to kind of provide a very different approach as we move into a post-pandemic world. We're seeing more collaborative offices over individual or focused tasks. So we're thinking we may go away with some of the offices that kind of around and do more of a collaborative environment where you come in and you bring your laptop and you're working with other people as opposed to kind of sitting in your office and things along those lines. Okay, so post-pandemic labor market. We knew this before, but by 2025, millennials will account for 75% of the workforce, with boomers retiring. I do not have solid data on this next piece, but what we have seen is that boomers are retiring a little quicker now because of the pandemic, and they're moving on to that next life spot, because millennials are taking into a larger piece. But what this means is that millennials are reshaping the way that companies think in a post-pandemic world. And so what we're seeing is your graduates of the last 10 years are the ones who are really making an impression in the workplace right now, and they're shaping what it's going to look like moving forward. Do they want more flexibility? Do they want this hybrid work environment? We kind of saw the desire for that before the pandemic hit. And obviously, with the pandemic, it sped the pieces up. And I think is what we've also seen is that C-level executives are more open to seeing now that this process works and that we can do this in our work environment. Social progress. There's a growing demand to connect businesses with social progress. And this is important, especially for our graduating students. They want to work with a business that is showing a strong and diverse culture. They want to see, pieces of what they're doing to increase this and what they're doing to make sure to prove that this is a culture of inclusivity. So social progress is something that we've seen increasing over the last year, of course, but this is something that was happening even before. I do think students are going to be more prepared to ask these questions in the interview. And our HR teams are looking to make sure that they have an answer for this and to make sure that they're providing that kind of work environment, even though it may be virtual. Of course, we've all seen an increase in technology, automation, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, robotics, and then the digital world. And so employee interaction and collaboration is important, adaptation of new technologies. And I think is what we'll also see is that our students are prepared for that. They understand technology. They've been working with it for years, and they proved over the pandemic that they can quickly adapt to that. And so I'm going to talk again in a minute a little more about how to make sure students are prepared for what that's going to look like. We're also seeing a more results-based over an hours-based approach. And so this, of course, allows for more flexible hours. And I think we've definitely seen that millennials are looking for that. And I think Gen Z are as well. And then hybrid work opportunities, as we had mentioned before. Okay, so Zoom fatigue is a very real thing. I think we are all seeing it. And we want to make sure that we're supporting students in this Zoom fatigue world. Online networking still works. And I am a huge LinkedIn advocate. LinkedIn is very important to my job. It has supported me in every position that I have gotten since graduating from undergrad. And I am a big advocate. And so one of the key pieces is impressing upon our students that LinkedIn can be a resource. Our employers are also Zoom fatigued and don't want to have a lot of these same interactions through Zoom. And so if we can encourage our students to create a LinkedIn, every student should graduate with a link, not just a LinkedIn account, but one that is robust and that they're interacting on. And employers are seeing that. Another piece that I'm seeing is guest speakers and not information sessions. And so not having someone from HR or whatever that may look like come and just give the information on their company or their opportunities, but allowing them to come in and tell a little bit about their story. Those are pieces that we're seeing that our HR professionals are enjoying. And on the flip side, students that I'm still working with are enjoying as well. Career fairs are incredibly important. I know Roderick was talking about those pieces in his segment, and they're very important, and they're great ways to connect. If an employer is committing to coming to the career fair, they want students there and available and talking with them. And so they are showing up, and these are not going away. I don't think yet. So looking at companies and not locations. One thing I had mentioned before was that companies are moving to this hybrid format or even completely virtual. So in a world where students have options, students can start looking at companies that match their values. What we saw before was that students would often decide on a location or a city and then look for a job within that city. Now we think that that could be switching. Students can find jobs across, lots of different platforms. LinkedIn is a great resource for students who are looking for some of these opportunities. And then they can do the research on the back end, find the companies that match and apply to jobs that way. They can still live and they can still, invest in some of those smaller towns and things along those lines, which are becoming more popular. Some of the Greensboros of the world, the Chapel Hill, Greenville, places along those lines, instead of your Charlotte, Raleigh, larger cities. One thing that I think is really important as we continue to work with students, and students have shown their flexibility over the last year or so, but is finding ways to encourage and practice this flexibility. And I think a couple of ways you can do that is by encouraging them to highlight this on resumes or on their LinkedIn profiles, or posting about this on LinkedIn. Ways that they're flexible, because companies are looking for flexible workers. There are a lot of unknowns right now. And so the better ways that they can highlight what this may look like is going to be more important as we move forward in a post-pandemic world. Another important piece is innovation, and allowing students the opportunity to show innovation through group projects or through projects in the classroom, maybe working with, in research or whatever this may look like. But if they can highlight this innovation, this is going to be an important piece. Things are changing so quickly right now in our world that students that can show innovation are going to provide more excitement almost to companies that they're looking for, because they show that they have the opportunity to think differently. And so if you're giving students the opportunity to really highlight this in their work, then this gives them the opportunity to talk about it in an interview or, in any kind of networking opportunity. One thing I wanted to go back to here is, there we go, is some of the networking piece. So as students are finding ways to network, making sure that we're providing opportunities for them to really connect. Connecting through whether this may be moving into more on-campus events as things start to open back up, but getting ways for students to to network differently than they have before. I think, I worked with so many students that were finishing out towards the end of last year and still may not have jobs. And that's a hard world for them right now, but things are opening back up and they have found these creative ways to highlight their skills. So that was a quick, I did want to leave just a few minutes at the end in case you all had any questions for me. That was a really quick overview on what some of the economic development is looking like in North Carolina. But please let me know if there are any questions that I can answer. It's a challenging world, but things are happening and things are moving. And we're excited to see the change that's coming, especially to North Carolina and I think across the country.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, if you don't mind sharing slides with us so that I can share with the rest of the attendees, that'd be great. Thank you for this opportunity. And we will have a lot more to discuss. You have packed so much in this just couple of slides and 20 minutes that, this is exactly kind of the way we structure our conference today. We have 4 20-minute segments that really grab your attention, get your mind going. And then in the afternoon, we dive into a 30-minute conversations around all those topics. So feel free, we do have a time right now for just maybe a question, and then as panelists and attendees, if you have thoughts, this is something we're going to do this afternoon. I appreciate it. It really resonated with me when you were talking about group work, because we see this right now with us, we see it with our students, and how this group project work on even your homework and everything then will carry on in space, the employment space, and being able to work across boundaries, right? So across, our students are located in, a variety of places in their hometowns, wherever they may be, and they're able to still connect and work on those group projects. Because as we all know, somewhere I read the statistics that the chances are, if you have a team of 5, at least one individual would be from a different country. Just a team of 5, not talking about other components of diversity that this small team will have. So this is just giving them a great opportunity to, be able to, practice with that, let alone work with and learn about a variety of different platforms that we can utilize for such work. I'm trying to see if there's anything in the chat. If anybody has a question right now to Mary Lisa, we would be happy to entertain or comment about anything that she has talked about. Looking at the chat.
One thing I will say, just kind of what you had mentioned there is, and I know a lot of times our faculty members strategically place students in these kind of groups so that they have that opportunity to work across even time zones. And that's the kind of preparation that students need in order to move into this post-pandemic world. And so, this is a lot of things are just changing and making sure that students are prepared. Obviously, these are impressive programs that our schools across North Carolina offer. And so just making sure that we are helping some of these areas, and we're giving students those pieces to talk about, even though they're moving into a very virtual world. Things will not be virtual forever. I don't think, this is as an extreme extrovert, I always say, I think there are still those of us who need that interaction. And so I think that's coming back, but absolutely.
There's some thumbs up coming up from those of us also who are ready to be able to do things in person. And yeah, absolutely. With right now in your role, do you see still kind of do you predict, I guess, majority of internships for this summer to be virtual yet, just because it's the summer, or what do you think? What are some of the trends that you're seeing or hearing?
So, and I think that's going to be mixed. I do think that many of our summer internships are still going to be in that virtual environment. I do think that we may start moving to more of a, maybe you greet everyone at a social or something along those lines where you get to meet people, but then most of your work is done virtually. I think that, of course, last summer, I'm sure you all saw a lot of those internships were canceled. And most of that is because employers were making so many changes at once that they couldn't also add into that. How do I then take this internship and create it in a virtual environment? There's so many different things that we're looking into, that we're trying to find these ways to make sure that we're creating an impactful summer internship, but also, getting our own job done, if that makes sense. Now, I think that these employers have navigated that and they've figured it out and they know what they're looking for a next summer internship. I'd be curious, Roderick, I was kind of in and out of the presentation, but you may have hit on some of this just to see I'm so curious as to what that looks like for internship, and to kind of see what those trends look like.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We really, I'm sorry, Roger, were you going to comment on that? I apologize.
Well, I was just going to say, I'll be happy to share that information with you and with the C3 committee, because I do have some data on that. So thanks for bringing it up, Mary, and I'll be sure to share that out.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think it will be interesting to see students still need internships, and especially with many programs requiring internships. So they're still here, and I'd be really interested to see what some of those trends might look like.
That's right. And also to see, we used to have this trend that so many, and I don't know the percentage top of my head, but so many internships then transferred to full-time offers. Will that trend continue? Will that be different? Because maybe some of the interns had to take internships not directly related maybe to their goals, or again, things change, so that would be something else to kind of look, again, comparing, trends year to year. So, well, thank you, Raj. Fantastic. I really appreciate the information that you have shared. So thank you for being here and for making the time, and really look forward to. So for those of you who have questions and would like to talk about these particular things, please make sure that you pick or attend the room that Mary Lisa will lead this afternoon. So thank you for this. At this time, I would like to introduce our next speaker, our next presenter, Dimitris Chisholm. And she is going to be standing between you and lunch, but, I'm sorry, a short break, but, I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic presentation. She's a Senior Director for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Strategy at GitHub. Prior to this, she served as a Global Diversity and Inclusion Lead at Red Hat. She was asked to speak on diversity and inclusion in post-COVID era.
Thank you, Dr. Korobova. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. And I will try to make this as enlightening as I can, because I understand what it means to stand between lunch. And so I will try to make sure to speed this along. So I'll share my screen here. Or I will attempt to share my screen here, and then slideshow. Actually, no, that's what I want. Are you all okay to see this?
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'll be speaking about diversity and inclusion post-COVID. And it was so interesting. I remember when the pandemic first hit and we were in the middle of executing, I was at Red Hat at the time, and we were executing our diversity and inclusion strategy. And when COVID hit, we had to almost make a full stop and really rethink to ourselves, what does diversity and inclusion look like in the middle of a pandemic or at the beginning of a pandemic? Because some of the programs and things that we had planned, a lot of in-person interaction, connection, and all those things, it didn't apply. A lot of the things that are typically known to be of importance in diversity and inclusion, which is always important in diversity and inclusion, might not have been the priority at the time. So we really had to think about that, pretty much scrap our strategy, start all over. A lot of companies had to do this. And then, a few months after the pandemic hit, we had the murder of George Floyd, which then put a lot of social injustice and racial equity at the forefront. So we had to pivot our strategies again. And so now that we are, a year out, we're now starting to realize and understand and think through, what does diversity and inclusion look like in this, what many people call, which I don't call this, like this new normal, right? So today I'm going to share a few things with you. One, just going over how the workplace is adjusting. 2, what students should know. 3, how you can prepare them. And then final takeaways. As I was listening to the speaker that went right before me, and I was listening to Roderick earlier this morning, a lot of these things are going to seem redundant, and that's actually intentional. I like when that happens. Diversity and inclusion is not a standalone program. It should be a part of every single strategy and every single thing that we do. So if you all of a sudden hear someone talking about diversity and inclusion and is not redundant with other things that the business is talking about, that's actually an issue. But I'll make sure that I try not to be redundant and try to make sure that we understand what being inclusive means with some of the things that they already spoke about earlier. So how the workplace is adjusting. So again, I was at Red Hat when the pandemic first hit, and I remember I was in a meeting with our talent acquisition and recruiting team, and everyone was lamenting around the fact that, oh no, how are we going to conduct interviews? We can't go to career fairs anymore. How are we going to recruit talent? And I remember in the middle of that meeting, I just said, oh my goodness, look at the amazing opportunity that's in front of us. Now, all of those students or, folks that we wanted to hire, but weren't able to accommodate because of lack of physical accommodations or gender neutral bathrooms, or they didn't feel comfortable with coming into a physical office for whatever reason, those that were not in cities in which we had office space, we now are able to open up and attract and recruit all of those folks. It literally opened up an amazing talent pool for us. And so I think someone else will tell someone they can enter in the waiting room here. So what I was so excited about is that it gave us a new opportunity to recruit and attract different talent that we otherwise might not have had access to. So as the speaker said before us, like students should no longer be looking into just physical locations in which they want to, locate after they graduate, but they can pretty much go anywhere in the world and still have access to a lot of opportunities that are available now. The second thing that I've seen companies really doing is moving from remote friendly to remote first. It's a subtle difference there, but it's really, really important. A lot of companies were already remote friendly, where they had work from home policies, or you had a laptop that you can take home with you. All of those good things. They had it where you had a lot of people in the physical locations, but then they would allow some folks to work remotely on a team, and they would, have everybody in a conference room for a meeting and then a couple of folks on the screen. Well, now companies are starting to flip that, where they're saying we're remote first, meaning that we are asking people to be remote and only come into an office is an absolute necessity. And I'm speaking more for tech companies because that's the industry in which I work. So a lot of them are going towards this space, but I'm also hearing this. I was in Washington, D.C., and I was there this past weekend. And a lot of my folks were telling me that a lot of government agencies are moving towards this as well, meaning that you have to have a very key business reason as to why you now need to be in the office. And so they are adjusting their culture, they're adjusting their policies, where it's all going to be remote first. So making sure that you have an appreciation and an understanding of that. Workplaces are also broadening their definition of diversity. I was reading an Inc. 100 article a few weeks ago, and one of the things that I was reading was around how diversity is now going to be thinking about who has access to cars or who has a car, how many households has more than one computer inside the household. Thinking about globally, when I've been building out the diversity and inclusion strategy here at GitHub, and we aren't even thinking or even prioritizing conversations around race and gender and all those things. We have a global platform. So what I'm thinking about is how do we get our platform and the technology into the neighborhoods in places like India or China or East Africa, all of those things. And so that's going to take on a different dimension, right? Rather than those traditional forms of race and gender. I have to really be thinking about what the local impact of diversity is going to mean, like how people are living differently, how they are convening differently, who has access to infrastructure, who does not. And so that definition of diversity is going to be very, very broad. So make sure you understand that piece as well. There's an increased focus on wellness. So a lot of companies now, and I've been speaking to all of my peers, they're actually pausing on engagement surveys now, and they're replacing them with wellness surveys because they are more concerned with how employees are feeling, their mental health. Do they feel like they have the support structures in place at home? What can we as employers do to support them? So understanding that we need for people to be engaged with their work and all those things, but that's just not the priority at this time. So there's much more increased focus on wellness. So what students should know? The first thing that I would like for students to understand that it's okay for them to request interview accommodations. So it used to be that the first interview was always a phone screen with a recruiter or someone in talent acquisition. And so now in the Zoom environment, it's starting to be all online, where you're face-to-face with someone. I have not found any employer that says that if a student or someone that they are recruiting says that I would prefer for my first interview to actually be a phone screen, we are completely okay with that. Some students, because they might be neurodiverse or neurodivergent, or they might have some things going on at home or in their backgrounds, all of those good things, the infrastructure might not be there. There are a whole host of reasons that they actually don't have to go into. So think about how they want to make that first impression out of the gate. And please make sure that they know it's okay to request that. And even if all of the interviews subsequently are Zoom interviews, they can actually let the talent recruiter know, or whoever's scheduling their interviews, that they're going to be off screen for that particular time. The second thing, and I definitely heard the speaker speak about this earlier, and I'm really glad, shift to a remote culture now. Do it while you are still in school. So I teach a college course as well at a university here in North Carolina, and not at the University of North Carolina, although I would love to teach at University of North Carolina, but I also teach at a university, and I have over 400 students per semester. And I require them to work in groups. And many college courses are doing this now, but I actually also lean into this a little bit, because I know I get so many complaints for students where they select a group, and then once something falls apart in that group, they'll come to the professor, and the professor assigns them a new group or figure out a way to kind of intervene. I always send them back and I tell them, go work on this yourselves. Like, you all have to work it out. I very rarely, I think I've only done it once in the 4 or 5 semesters that I've been teaching, have really intervened with students in that way. I've also seen students that'll say, we're in a group of 5. One of our students didn't, one of our group members didn't show up and didn't do their part of the assignment. So we're turning the assignment without their portion in it. And we just want to get graded on the portion we did and not that. So I always have to explain to them, that's not the way that the world works. I always give them this example. When I started at Red Hat, I had a team of 5, and within a week, because of a whole host of things, someone went out on medical leave, someone went out on maternity leave, someone else went out on paternity leave, like the whole team was gone and it was just me. And we didn't have open head count because these people were on leave. I was still responsible for making sure that I delivered on the work of our team. So just because you lose someone in a team doesn't mean you get to say, I don't have to do that. So even though we assigned them groups, I ask that you start preparing students or helping professors understand how this would work in a work environment, and really making sure that they do those things and prepare them there. Understand the company culture ASAP. And that means that when you're interviewing, please reach out and talk to folks. I don't get this enough, but I'm very happy when I do. If someone's interviewing at GitHub, I love nothing more than someone to email me or hit me up on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm interviewing at GitHub. I would like to learn more about the company, or I would like to know more about the company culture. Almost always we take those conversations. Now, we might not necessarily give them a leg up on an interview or all those good things, but we're happy to let you know about the company culture, because otherwise we don't want people to come in blind. Like, Retention is a thing that we focus on a lot. And so I like for people to know exactly what they're getting into so they can make an informed decision. So make sure that they understand a company culture. When I was at Red Hat, it was very meeting heavy, email heavy. I'm at GitHub now and they don't do email. They only use Slack, and they it's very rare that you can get a meeting. It's all about async communication. Like you have to have a strong business case as to why you would convene a meeting. And so that was a huge adjustment for me. And so I've seen a lot of people struggle with that. So make sure that your students understand how they want to work and to get with a company that really supports that type of way that they want to work. Make sure that they know some tips and tricks on how to build relationships and influence. Again, I started at GitHub 100% remote and didn't know anybody in the company. That was a first for me. I always know someone, or even if I get there, I can find someone that went to my undergraduate school so that we at least had that in common. I didn't have any of that. And my role was in diversity and inclusion. And they kind of plopped me in the, after onboarding, they were like, okay, go and do your job. I wasn't sure who the people were that I needed to be talking to. Like, how do you meet people that are outside of your team, that are outside of your org? So that right there is a skill set that really impacts whether or not someone feels included or feel like they belong at a university. I mean, at a company. So make sure that they understand that it's okay that you can hear somebody speak at an all hands, or you can hear about someone at a diversity and inclusion social event that's online, and you can go and send them an email, or not an email if you're at GitHub, but send them a message and say, hey, I'm new to the company. I would just love to learn more about what you do. So those 10 or 15 minute coffee syncs, those 10 or 15, 30-minute lunch sessions, all the things that you would normally do when you are in person by the water cooler going to lunch with people, you still have to make an effort to do those things. It just looks differently. One of my interns last summer, when she came, I checked in on her after about a couple of weeks and I said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm really struggling. And I said, well, tell me more about why you're struggling. She said, last summer, I worked in the office or the desk right next to my manager. So it was constant syncs all day long. We went to lunch all the time, or at least went for a walk outside. And she was like, I don't have that now. And I, as her manager, didn't have that amount of time either. So what we did when she shared this with me, and I'm so glad she was open and shared it, we started scheduling time where she would shadow different members of our team to their meetings. We would add her to all of the calendar invites for us for the week. She could decline if she had any conflicts, but it was a way for us to bring her along, which was the exact same thing that I would have done had we been in person. If I saw her at my desk or at her desk, I would have said, hey, I'm on my way to this meeting. If you're not busy, do you want to tag along with me? So we had to start doing that virtually. So making sure that they understand what their needs are. If they're struggling to build those relationships and those influence, reach out to others who may be able to help them with this. Stay engaged. It is so easy to hide behind Zoom, right? Where you could turn your camera off and completely be doing something else and no one knows. Please let your students know that we know if they're not engaged. And it goes back to that culture thing. I was speaking with my sister it was this past weekend, and we were driving up to DC, and she was saying that in their meetings, only the person who speaks would have their camera on, which is similar to what we have here, which is perfectly fine. And I told her that was so weird to me. At GitHub, just about everybody has their camera on, unless there's like some virtual fatigue or something like that, and no one's going to question it. But if you show up to every single meeting with your camera off all the time, you're probably going to have a conversation with your manager just around feedback and how people are not, feeling necessarily connected with you. If there are reasons where you need to have your camera off all the time, you might just have to do a little bit more in order to make sure that your voice is heard and people don't forget that you're in the room. So you might have to be more engaged in chat. You might have to Make sure that you're asking really good questions when you do speak. Again, it's easy for people to forget about you or not select you for different assignments and all of those things if you are not engaged. And so, like I said, use Zoom, but make sure that you're balancing those things. And then the next thing is to be agile. So right now we are in this remote first type of environment where everyone is remote, but then you're going to have people start returning back to work. No one, not even scientists, really understand how this thing is going to shape out within the next 6 months or the next 12 months. We could go back to being fully remote again, especially next winter. It literally could be a back and forth. And I saw some companies that opened up some of their offices and then within a couple of weeks, they had to shut them back down. So it might be a lot of back and forth before this thing really settles. So being agile and flexible in your workspace, almost learning how to pack light. I remember when we got the call and said the office was shutting down it was a Friday, and we got the message like at 3 o'clock. So you had to grab whatever you could. And we assumed that we will be back in a week, and it's over a year later and we haven't been back yet. So making sure that you're packing light and being flexible so that you know how you can succeed regardless of whether you're at home, whether you're at work, whether you are in this hybrid back and forth, A/B type schedule that you see in a lot of the schools. So how you can prepare them, you as career counselors. The first thing is help them explore alternative ways of working and what works for them. So some students, again, like to be at home. They like to be remote. Some of them have to be, in person, a lot of group work and have that physical environment. Make sure that you have them own that and really find the work environments that support them. Highlight their adaptability in interviews. I won't go over that again because the speaker before me did, but if they are very successful in a group work and group assignments and they have results, make sure you find ways to highlight that in your interviews. Own your diversity. We all have heard horror stories from many years about people that, are covering. They won't share that they are neurodivergent. They won't share that they're LGBTQ. They won't share, socioeconomic status or whether or not they're first generation college students. Companies are looking for this now. We understand that we need a diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and all of those things. And we're actively looking for it. And so having students own their diversity is actually a plus for them. Make sure you prepare them for online interviews. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the Zoom backgrounds just be really awry with not just students, with a lot of folks for that. Understand the interview culture. There are some companies where you need to be in full, suit, shirt, tie, very crisp. There are some companies, especially Silicon Valley companies, where whoever's interviewing you is probably going to show up in a hoodie. And so you have to make sure you understand what type of environment and culture that you're interviewing for so that you can adapt yourself as well during the interview. Look for non-traditional opportunities. And this is specifically around internships. I heard about internships and how some of them were canceling all of that. We have a program that we partner with called Major League Hacking, and it allows students from anywhere in the world to pick up real work assignments from different companies, and they get paid a stipend. So you don't have to be attached to a company specifically. You're going through this program, and that's a body of work that you can put on your resume. We look at that just as much as resume experience. So working for nonprofit organizations, going in, especially if you're in IT or a software developer, going on these platforms and picking up work and really participating in communities there, that is actually one of the ways that you can get very valid work experience that will go a long way. Make sure that how you can prepare students is move beyond the resume. There are some companies now that they don't even want your resume. They want your LinkedIn profile link and they want your GitHub link. That's all that they want. Now, LinkedIn and GitHub, we actually don't like this because it actually, it's a lot of bias that goes in there. It's a lot of privilege because not everybody has access to these. But just to make sure that students understand that we're looking at all of that. If I receive a resume and it's somebody I'm interested in, the first thing I'm doing is typing their name in Google. So make sure that they understand that we're looking at their LinkedIn profile. Please do not be applying for a marketing internship or something like that. And they don't have their LinkedIn profile updated or communications. And then providing tools to help them evaluate companies. All companies are saying that they're focused on diversity and inclusion now, but you have to prepare them to ask questions to figure out who really is doing this. So that is it. The other ones were just some wrap ups, but I'll share my slides out and you all will have access to them.
Demetrius, all I can say is wow. And I know the break is going to be 3 minutes shorter, but everyone will appreciate and they want more time. So I know your session will have a lot of folks this afternoon, which you can actually take time to go over the rest of your slides. Absolutely fantastic. And I just want to tell everyone that this is networking in the making, right? We reached out to somebody who introduced me to somebody who introduced me to you. So I'm just so grateful that we got to meet and we found this opportunity. And wow, I just really wish we had more time, but I think everybody needs a quick bathroom break with all the coffee we had. But thank you so much. And really looking forward to diving deeper into, you affect so much information. So I'm still processing myself. So with that, thank you so much. Let's everybody take about 6-minute restroom break and we will come back at about 11:20. Thank you so much. All right, welcome back. Just giving it a moment here. I have just got a phone call from the next speaker, so I'm sending him a link. Just one moment, please, as you're returning from break. All right, welcome back, everyone, and I appreciate it. Sorry for the delay. All right, moving on, we have two more speakers before our break. Dr. Mohammad Jarahi is an associate professor at UNC Chapel Hill. His areas of expertise include organizational informatics, organizational implications of ICT, future of work, flexible work, mobile knowledge work, gig work, digital labor platforms, and implication of artificial intelligence for work. Dr. Jarahi was asked to speak on digital nomads in the future of work. Welcome and thank you very much.
Thanks, Nadia. Hi, everyone. Good morning. We're still in the morning. It's an honor to be here. Thanks, Nadia, for inviting me and Lori to do the first invitation. Let me see if I can share my screen here. All right. Do you see my PowerPoint presentation fine?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So if you figure there's something wrong with my voice, let me know. Once in a while, when our son thinks, you know, me and his mom are in our room, go and just unplug the internet. And he knows that everyone will jump out. That's the bottom line. So my research, just a little bit of background, lies at the intersection of a lot of different areas. But if I want to summarize what it is about, it's about the intersection of the use affordances of information technology, however we define it, and new organizational forms, new organizational activities. And I will provide examples of them, what I mean by this intersection of technology and new forms of work. Today, I will highlight two specific big changes happening in organizations. Some of it has to do with COVID, but these have started way earlier, like I would say 15 years ago, and they've been accelerated as a result of COVID and other catalysts. A big, really important catalyst here is the technological change. That's not the only one. And I will bring up the case of digital nomadism. And I think it is relevant because it showcases some of these important patterns of change in organizations, even in traditional organizations. But it's really important to understand, you guys are quite aware of this, work is happening at the edge of organizations now, sometimes outside of the organizations, but it interfaces with traditional organizations. So organizations are still relevant, but people's relationship with organizations are becoming much more dynamic, and there are different ways to connect themselves with the organization with that nuclei. So the first change is, which is the easier one to understand and capture, is the change in technology. You guys have seen it. You feel it. Today is different from 5 years ago. I was talking about some of these changes with students yesterday, and they were bringing up the case of Blockbuster. Blockbuster was a company, was a thing, not anymore. And I remember, I quite remember that I was in graduate school. The first step of that disintermediation of Blockbuster becoming irrelevant was Netflix sending CDs to homes, DVDs to homes. And that wasn't the biggest disruptive change. The biggest disruptive change in that industry was VOD, video on demand. And that requires number two here, which is pervasive digital infrastructures. Internet connections have improved massively. I moved here since 2013. I moved here in 2013, and I've seen massive changes in our access to the internet over the past 7 years. It's more than 7 years, but anyway. So You see that happening everywhere, and that enables different types of connection, different types of technology. Some of technological tools that we are using here are not really cutting edge in terms of the core technology like Zoom, but Zoom has become more pervasive because we've got better internet connectivity in different parts of this country and across the world. Another really big change is mobile devices, mobile technologies, smart mobile technologies that was ushered in after the introduction of Apple iPhone. And right now, a lot of people, a good number of people around us use their mobile cell phones, iPads as the primary means of computation. And that's a very interesting, important point that enables mobility, that enables somehow location independence, because I cannot just move my workstation here as easily. Consumerization of technology 30, 40 years ago, the best technologies were used in organizations. Organizations had the best access to some of the best technologies out there. IBM of the world, US Navy of the world, you had to have connectivity. You had to have a lot of money to be able to use mainframes. Right now, the cutting edge technology is first used by consumers. In many cases, our students, people that we're working with, their personal devices, personal technologies are not just hardware devices, but cloud services are better than the things that they will be using in JP Morgan of the world. So that actually changed the expectation of these people, and it may frustrate them because the technology that they're using today, and some of these technologies self-update themselves. One of the most important points about this ecosystem is generativity. The technology, as opposed to our dumb phones, this technology is different tomorrow because I can install another app about COVID. So literally the technology changes, and some of the enterprise technologies are not as generative. They are not as malleable. Another really big change in the technology landscape is the platform economy, something that I research closely. Platform economy has really important consequence for organizations. We've got Uber as the icon of platform on-demand economy, but that is not the only type of work that is being done. A lot of organizations are now paying attention. What I mean by organization, traditional organizations are paying close attention to this space because it may shows really important things about how future work will be done. I'll come back to it when I describe digital nomads. So all of these technological changes have shifted how, where, when we get work done. We are more location independent. We have more flexible schedule. But technology is not the only reason behind these changes. A simultaneous changes in norms in organizations. Many organizations are now moving towards more contract-based temporary engagement with the core of their workforce. So when I say the core of their workforce, in many cases, these are not traditional 9-to-5 workers. Microsoft, Google, more than 50% of their core work is being done by contractor. They come in many different forms and shapes. Google has 30 ways of connecting with these individuals. It can be Accenture bringing 100 people and managing those 100 people, all the way to contracting to individual workers. So there are many different arrangements to work with these people, but it is very important to understand that the core of organizations are becoming smaller and smaller. And this is what we call plug and play participation. They bring in these people, they may plug them out as needed, on-demand relationship with workers. Another really big change over the past, I would say, 7-10 years, we keep hearing about digital natives, how the generation of people graduating now since, let's say, 10 years ago are very different from the previous generation. A lot of it is hype, a lot of it is mischaracterization. They do not have commitment. They have very different perspective towards time. Multitasking is destroying their attention span. A lot of it is not rooted in research, but I would say everything about the difference between these people and previous generation boils down to the desire for flexibility. These people want to have more flexible work environment, work arrangement, work norms. Interestingly enough, that is not unique to this generation anymore. This survey recently done, a very big survey, shows also people who are looking for their next job across the board from different generation, they also look for flexibility as one of the major elements of their work. So we'll come back to this flexibility because it's such an important defining factor. A lot of new work arrangement can be understood as flexible work environment. And COVID has only made it more important, more central in our workforce. Digital nomads, it's an interesting indication of some of these changes. I'm not necessarily interested in digital nomads themselves, where they come from. I've studied them, but what they mattered to me was this really interesting new intersection of work and technology. Around the year 2014, I keep hearing really interesting pieces of news, revelations about this new generation of worker, I would say genre of workers. They're not necessarily very young. And digital nomad, the term had been used before. I would say the first time was 1998. There was a book about this term, but this was a resurgence. These people readapted the term and actually started to use that as their identity because it provided them with interesting affordances. We were one of the early people to study digital nomads, and this was a work done by Khalees Nash, at the time impressive undergraduate student, and was published, and now it's one of the main sources of understanding digital nomads. So they are situated at the intersection, at the confluence of four different elements, four different, I would say, changes. I'll go over each, and hopefully that help us understand where they come from, and more important than where they come from, what is the implication of this for future of work? What can we learn from this population? What do they show us? Because in another article, we analyzed the tweets about digital nomads that is published in the Journal of First Monday. And we realized there is this space this group of people that closely watch the digital nomad space. And they were different from the rest of the space on Twitter sphere. And the reason they were different, they were bigger organization, consulting firms, technologists like IBM. They were trying to understand what's happening with these people. How do they actually get some really crazy things done in practice? And how can these ideas be extrapolated from the case of digital nomads to broader future work settings? So there are digital workers. Digital work is a form, I would say a lot of knowledge work is now shifting to digital work, the work that happens in digital realm. In many cases, the input, the output, the process, they're all happening in digital world. The input is digital, the output is digital. Digital nomads, many of them are web designers, content editor. And why that is an important part of their work? Because digitality allowed them to go location independent. And that is happening. You can see in the COVID, a lot of people, really I would say, well-paid jobs did not have this luxury, like dentists. They were quite location dependent. The work had to be done from a specific location. So this is an interesting dynamic of the digital nomad work, which we call digital work. And at the end of the day, is digital mediation that makes this work happen. Technology is such a central part of, technology is actually the workplace for a lot of these workers. And that workplace can be defined along different dimensions. But one thing that I want you to understand here is the concept of digital workers. Sometimes we call them bit worker as opposed to atom worker. Atom worker, people who actually play with physical, the physicality is an important part of their job. Digital worker, a lot of it is just playing with bits and bytes. So this is from our research, the backpack, the office of one of these workers. You can tell she was a photographer, digital photographer, sending photos, and digital designer. But this is pretty much her office. That's how she defined her office. And this office is quite mobile. Another dimension is gig work. The gig economy is such a central part here. On-demand relationship with corporation and the supply. I talk about how supply happened. The demand also changing. A lot of organizations are now more comfortable outsourcing things to individual workers. One of the reasons is just in many cases it is cheaper. They do not need to bring full-time workers. One of the reasons Microsoft or Google are using this type of workforce is it is way cheaper in terms of overhead costs. They do not need to provide all those perks, and it can get abusive in many cases. Digital platforms like Upwork, Fiverr, they play such an important role here. And there is another dynamic, I'm not able to get into it, the dynamic of algorithmic management that has tons of implication for traditional organizations. You're a manager being an algorithm rather than a human being. And that is not just limited, restricted to the gig economy. A lot of bigger organizations are eyeing algorithmic management at this point. Nomadic work has been around for at least 20, 30 years. That term has been used before, as I noted. But this brings another really interesting dimension to it. This is country to country type of nomadism. We have a lot of nomadic workers in the triangle even before the COVID. Actually, COVID made that movement a little bit more difficult. But they are taking it to the extreme form. So one really interesting point here is sometimes these people are literally taking a nomadic lifestyle. They stay in hard winters. They go to hot places like Bali, and in winter they come back to Europe. I'm sorry, the winter they go to the hot places, and then the summer they come back to Europe, where the weather is more pleasant. And that is the form of movement that traditional nomads had. Right. So another really important point along the same dimension, the last dimension, is adventuring, being an adventurous. There are specific locations that these people frequent. They're exotic in most cases. There are important patterns, trends that enable this type of work, this type of movement, like co-working and co-living. There are very important aspects of digital nomad life. One of the reasons is if you move so fast, so frequently, that can be isolating. So these people sometimes move in pockets with specific people, and these arrangements of being able to work with other people, to live with other people, they help them a lot. I'll come back to the boundaries between work and lifestyle in my final concluding remark. All right, what does this mean for future of work? As I noted earlier, I'm not just interested in the composition, the demographics of these people. I want to understand what does that tell us. We've already seen some of these in the previous slide. Flexibility matters. That's how a lot of these people are embarking on digital nomad work lifestyle. That is hard. It comes with a lot of challenges and constraints. You can see that can be quite difficult when you have a family, but they really appreciate the norm of flexibility. And that is flexibility along at least multiple dimensions. Locational flexibility, organizational independence, organizational flexibility. Working across different organizations can be problematic. You do not have the benefits, identity attached to one organization, but it comes with really, really important sources of knowledge and knowledge sharing, working on different projects. Being able to work remotely, decoupling of work and space. A lot of these people, their office is their mobile digital office. It can be unpacked, packed and unpacked wherever they go, wherever they have connectivity. Different work-life balance is quite evident in the case of digital nomads. For some of us, that is not, we cannot really do that. That's not easy to imitate. But many of these people, most of these people, they're not tourists. They travel at the same time that they're working. So the work and travel are quite mixed. And this is very a contrast with traditional form of work when you work really hard until a specific age and then retire and you go see the world. These people are seeing the world while they're working. On-demand work, the work plug and play participation I noted earlier. For the supply and demand work, labor, and the demand from organization, this is happening. This is becoming much more often. Look at the stock price of Upwork, for example. Particularly after pandemic, a lot of organizations are experimenting with it. It's becoming just much more common. And COVID will have lasting effects. In the short term, I would say it will decrease the mobility, but in long term, because the changing norms in bigger organizations, COVID will change a lot of things. I just want to leave you with this about digital transformation in more traditional organizations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was, again, so much information packed into 20 minutes. Very much appreciated, and looking forward to looking at your slides in more depth and definitely having a discussion and an opportunity for our participants to ask you questions in the afternoon breakout. Obviously, a lot of research you have done around this area, and you're definitely an expert. So we're very humble and grateful to have you here. Thank you so much. All right, and at this time, I will introduce you our last presenter before lunch break, Kate Hammond. She is a career transition advisor at Princeton University. Prior to that, she served as a graduate career advisor at Babson College. Kate was asked to deliver a career coach's perspective on pandemic trends that are here to stay.
Hi, thank you so much for that warm introduction. Give me a second here to share my screen. It says one participant can share screen at a time, multiple, so that is giving me a bit of trouble.
Sorry, just a second. Mohammed, do you want to make sure you're not
No,
sharing?
I think I got it.
Okay,
I got it.
perfect.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Okay, sorry. Slow start, but off and running now. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Kate Hammond, and I work at Princeton University as the career advisor for faculty spouses and partners. I'm part of the Dean of the Faculty's faculty recruiting team, but I also work with postdocs who are interested in exploring opportunities outside of academia. So the main thing the populations I work with have in common is that everyone is in transition. Big changes, and change is hard. And wow, you know, this pandemic has been a big change for everyone. I don't know about you, but my job has become increasingly challenging this year. I'm sure yours has too. You know, we've heard how different things are for job seekers, students doing internships, and it's also very different for people who are recruiting and managing these new employees. So I'm going to talk about some of the trends I'm seeing. We had gotten really comfortable with historically low unemployment. In 2017, it was 4%. 2018, it was 4%. 2019, it was 4%. That was our norm, and we were comfortable. And the pandemic hit, and unemployment suddenly skyrocketed to 15%. We're now back around 6%. I can see it looks like North Carolina, it's about 6.5%. In New Jersey here, we're still at around 8%. But more than anything, this high unemployment news just really rattled the mindset of the job seeker. There will be fewer retail jobs, more e-commerce positions coming online, more opportunities to work from home. The new normal is going to be different, but it's not going to be terrible. The biggest challenge that I am facing is helping students boost their self-confidence, reinvigorate, really motivate them to achieve their goals. They took the news really hard, and they internalized it, and they're more and more disconnected and isolated and the inward thinking. It's really hard to get people out of the TikTok, Reddit rabbit hole. This inward thinking has really not helped job seekers. So how to encourage people to get out there and network when there is so much Zoom fatigue? You know, we need to encourage job seekers to get out there, learn what they don't know, and more than anything else, get outside their bubble. So some of the trends that I'm seeing as a career advisor are, I don't know what you guys are binging on Netflix during this pandemic, but I have been enjoying Emily in Paris. And during the pandemic, people didn't feel comfortable getting on airplanes, getting on trains, buses, you know, even sharing a ride in a car suddenly seemed uncomfortable. Yesterday, there was an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education with the headline, the stranded. The pandemic has not just disrupted international students' college experiences, but it has marooned them all over the world. So being closer to family, being within driving distance has become a bigger consideration for some people. I'm not sure this trend will stick, but I do think that geography will be very important for job seekers in the future. Fewer people are willing to move anywhere. Job seekers are increasingly looking for companies that will let them work anywhere. And a lot of companies are letting their employees work anywhere. You no longer have to move to headquarters for that corporate promotion. And this is going to be a very positive change for families, for women who historically have been reluctant to relocate, for underrepresented minorities who prefer to stay in their home communities. I think there's going to be a lot of positive change. So I recently worked with a German postdoc who was really wrestling with the idea of staying in the US, or she really had no connections, no family in the United States other than having been here for a few years for a postdoc. But was she ready to give up on the American dream? We spent a lot of time going through the pros and cons of moving home. And then she received an offer from Pfizer, based in Germany, close to her family. So again, we spent a lot of time wrestling with to take the offer, to not take the offer, to give up on the American dream, to move home. And ultimately, the conversation then turned to the next trend I'd like to focus on, which is values. Was Pfizer a company that reflected her values, and how important was that to her? So she accepted the job, and we all know the end of the story, that Pfizer was the early hero of the pandemic with the first vaccine approved in the United States. And wow, so now I talked to her and she's really happy that she's working at a company that reflects her values, and is feeling a lot of pride. So values. Values are more important than ever to job seekers. We'd already seen the trend of students looking for mission-focused companies, but now that is really magnified. Values are more important than ever. Jobs, they're in our personal space. Boundaries have completely evaporated. Technology was blurring boundaries before the pandemic, but now there is no physical separation. You cannot leave work at the office anymore because it's home. So with the elimination of boundaries, we are learning a lot more about our colleagues. And this generation of job seekers, which I previously had often referred to as the oversharers, they were so used to sharing everything on Facebook and Instagram that they would go into job interviews and say things that, in my mind, weren't necessary or relevant to the job, but they have a very different level of comfort with all of who they are. And now with the elimination of boundaries, with work coming into our home and employees telling us everything about themselves, job seekers I see looking for organizations where they feel comfortable doing just that, where they can share their authentic selves. And they are really demanding employers that accept 100% of who they are. The third trend I'm seeing is, I don't know, this is touched on what the last speaker mentioned. What do these companies have in common? It's called different things at different places, but at Evernote and GitHub, it's called unlimited PTO. At Glassdoor, open paid time off. At GE, permissive time. At my time at Kronos, non-accrual vacation at VMware. Flexible time off at Grant Thornton, discretionary time off, has a different name in different places, but I am increasingly seeing, in 2019, only 5% of companies had unlimited vacation, but I'm seeing this more and more now. And it's expanding beyond the hard to hire tech positions. I now see titles like engineer, data analytics, finance, business analyst, financial analyst, business development, audit, sales, customer service, HR, even recruiting jobs. And is it a good thing? Well, the jury's still out. I think right now everybody appreciates employees not feeling the pressure to come in to the office when they're really sick. So unlimited vacation or more of a flex time means that employees will stay home when they have a sniffle. And hopefully we will be flattening the curve on more than just coronavirus. It also means in December, there's no rush to use it or lose it for vacation. It reduces the amount of time human resources is spending tracking employee pay time off. And the financial impact, it reduces payouts at the end of an employee's employment. Often employees were accumulating vacation days and then getting a big payout, almost like a severance package when they left the company, because they would be paying out for the vacation days that they hadn't used. So if all of these trends mean that you no longer, vacation isn't as important, and I would argue that vacation had historically been a big retention strategy for a lot of companies. They had rewarded longtime employees with more and more vacation, but this generation of workers wasn't sticking around to see those increased vacation times. So vacation was, it has always been very different for this generation. So if they have all of the vacation they want, or they have all the flexibility that they want. So before the pandemic, the number one thing I helped people negotiate for after money, vacation, and title was flexibility. Can I work from home on Fridays? But now they have a lot more flexibility. You can do laundry while you're working. You might not need to take that half day off to cook Thanksgiving dinner because the potatoes can be boiling behind you and you can mash them in the 5 minutes in between meetings. So now that people have proven that they can work from home and they finally have the greater flexibility they had been looking for, the things I see people negotiating for are very, very different. A lighter laptop, a bigger monitor, a better home office chair, gym membership. I'd love to hear what you're seeing people negotiate for. Just last week, I had 3 people try to negotiate for more money to pay for their utilities. Working from home, you're paying for air conditioning and heating in ways that you weren't before. None of them were successful, but they tried. So the big thing that people are having to negotiate for, though, in this new norm is time with their boss. I know that sounds kind of odd, but I guaranteed time with their boss is becoming increasingly important. I spoke to a counterpart at Northeastern recently. You know, Northeastern, Boston school with an amazing reputation for getting students jobs. They have a really solid co-op program. And I recently spoke with a counterpart at Northeastern, and she described how frustrated the co-op students are. They are going in to their co-ops, but management isn't there. Their bosses are working from home. The whole management team is working from home. One office manager I spoke to who was trying to, you know, not just a professional office manager, not in the line of the business, said it's like Lord of the Flies. She's there with all of these young interns and co-op students, but there is no one to model professional behavior for them. All of these young people with really limited professional skills, they need a mentor, and right now that might be something you need to negotiate for. I spoke to a first-year law student, a first-year lawyer just out of law school, who said, you know, nobody's in the office. There is no mentor. So not only does that mean that the students and new employees, they are seeing a 24/7 work culture. But with the co-ops and a lot of the student interns, they are in the office all day. but then the managers have switched to flex time and are emailing them at 24/7, so all hours of the day. So it's really hard to feel connected in the early days of a new job, and no one is modeling professional behavior for these new employees. So the new norm, I think these students are going to need soft skills more than ever. So what do we really need to teach as career development professionals? These pictures are of the celebrities of the celebrities of the pandemic. I hope you recognize in the upper, on the top there, that is the BBC interview where he was interrupted by the child and clearly didn't know what to do. And then in the lower right is the lawyer who had the cat filter and couldn't figure out how to get it off. We all are very familiar with CNN Jeffries Tobin, who, had a big oops. So the mock interview has become increasingly important, but we're looking for really, really different things. What does your background look like? What is your lighting? How does your outfit look against the background? But I'm also wondering, as career advisors, if we no longer have to do these mock interviews in real time. Students can record their mock interviews and they can be reviewed by career development professionals at any time of the day, give written feedback and mail it back. So the negative is that this could extend our workday, but the positive is we're meeting students really more on the time schedule that they are looking for. So students aren't confined to our 9-to-5 day. And we don't have to spend as many late nights in the office doing workshops because we can have the students submit mock interview videos and then think more about these other aspects. The other thing I'm concerned about is as it becomes easier to interview people, I think more people will be interviewed. There won't be the cost associated with flying people in for interviews. So I think students are going to experience more disappointment. The same way when the Common App meant that students were applying to more colleges, they were rejected from more colleges. So they will be more interviews, and we're going to have to work to manage disappointment because even if they make it to the final round interview, their chances used to be 1 in 3. Now their chances might be more like 1 in 4 and 5. So the other thing we think we really need to focus on teaching students is written communication skills. With fewer in-person meetings, it means more emails. And business writing is much shorter than academic writing, and more formal than texting, which is most of what the communication of these is going on right now. So thinking about ways to grab a reader's attention, don't waste their time, make sure all the relevant details are included, but this sort of short, concise business style of writing is going to be more and more important. So the new skills that are going to be needed for post-2020 management. Zoom managers are really going to need to be able to manage, inspire, coach, motivate. They're going to need to learn how to show compassion, empathy. Emotional intelligence is going to be even more important than ever. With productivity rising 20% during the pandemic, the bar has risen and expectations are even higher than ever. So how do we keep productivity up and how do we keep motivation up? And these soft skills are going to be more important than ever. How do you keep people connected beyond the outputs? This cartoon here is, good morning, everybody. I brought the donuts. We all know that awesome person who brings in food to share, and suddenly there isn't that kind of a connection anymore. So how do remote managers measure impact? More time is going to be needed for reflection. We're going to have to really work on fostering growth mindsets, figure out how to measure impact, and more employee recognition is going to be more important than ever. So lastly, I don't mean to end on a downer, but I really wanted to talk about mental health. Mental health issues are really on the rise. It's really awkward to have conversations about mental health, but that is something I have been thinking a lot about lately. And I've decided to put it in the signature of my email, all of the resources for mental health at my university, because I think that work and life is completely blurred and it's really straining people, and we need to figure out to normalize mental health help in ways that are non-threatening and seem normal. So thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate being here today.
Okay, wow, thank you so much. Definitely one thing I will do is add those signatures as well. That's just one takeaway and one to-do list. So this was fantastic.
Hi, Kate. It's not you. I think Nadia might have frozen.
Okay, good.
I always get nervous if I'm the one freezing or if the rest of the world is freezing. So I think that might be Nadia, but certainly we so appreciate you joining us today. This was very, very exciting information to think about and to see how it impacts so many of us.
Yeah, I think Nadia's frozen. I was just going to jump in and say we are on lunch right now. So we will come back at 12:45. So please enjoy your lunch break and we will see you all very soon.
Thank you.